Just to get us started, if you could just introduce yourself, what your relationship to Mary's Place is, and how you first got involved with Mary's Place.
Okay, so my name is Kristi Tollner, and I worked for Mary's Place from 2011 until 2021, so just almost about 10 years. And I first got involved. I was living on the East Side, and I didn't know a whole lot about homelessness, and I felt like I was going to be 50 years old, and I really wanted just to learn more, and also like what some of the issues were. And I reached out. I think at that point. I reached out to Marty Hartman and through an ad that she had placed for a finance director. And I thought, well, this is interesting because that's my background, and that would be a good way for me to come in and get to, engage with the organization. And I met Marty over a phone call. I think it was a Friday afternoon, and she was only working a few days a week at that point, I believe, and dishes were clanking in the background as she was trying to multitask. And I thought, well, this is a very peppy, fun person, and I really connected with her just out the gate. And I thought, and so at the end of it, she invited me to come in for an interview. So I came in probably the next week and met with the treasurer at the time, and Marty, and we met in the nurses' room at the Bell Street location that we had there. And it was an open ceiling, and the Women's Day Center was operating right outside the door. And Marty just kept apologizing for the noise because it was really loud, and it was a really small table that the three of us were huddled over. And I just remember at that point just being so just overwhelmed by the experience and the level of excitement in the building. And it was just a place that I knew at that point that I wanted to be a part of. So Marty called me a little bit later in the day, and I had to think about it because it was going to mean commuting to downtown, and that was a whole new world for me. And where would I park, and do I need to bring my own computer, and what does it look like as far as those kind of logistics go. And so then I thought about it overnight, and then Marty called me the next day, and I was very excited to accept the position. So that was in 2011. And
That's
that's the
great.
finance director. Well, it's finance, HR, operations, and which had facilities underneath it too, and IT. So it was a little bit of a combination position in the beginning.
That's great. Do you have a favorite memory of Mary's Place? I know there are so many, but do you have a couple?
Yeah, I think that for me, one of the favorite memories was back in the day when we really cooked meals in this community kitchen, and the ladies would arrive in the morning. It was a day center at that point, so we did not have the family shelter. We did have a rotating church shelter at that time, but really in the mornings, it was a day center from 7 to 3. So, and it was really only one facility. So the women, and it was primarily all single women. And they'd arrive in the morning, and we'd go and figure out what was in the pantry, because it was back in the day when we were really doing mostly donated food and such, and just decide what was going to be cooked for lunch. And I remember just the team in the office. We had the development director, myself, and Marty, and then a program person, and Liz McDaniel, who was there from the beginning of my journey with Mary's Place. And we would just be, ready for lunch, and we'd all be able to eat together with the women. And it was really encouraged that we take that break every day and go sit in the day center. And it was small enough at that time that was just it was a really I loved that we were able to do that, and to make time in our day to go and sit and have those conversations, and really hear about what was going on outside of the day center in the streets, and how these women were making it through to the next morning until they could come back and get some dry clothes and food, and really listening to those stories was really I just remember being really special. And then anytime we had staff, we could participate in anything as a staff, because it was so easy to get siloed in your little office away from the program. But a big part of why I wanted to work at Mary's Place was I really wanted to be in the program and not just siloed into my finance arena. So that was really special, is when the staff would come together and maybe we'd help on the program side because they needed help on the floor that day, or they would come and help, especially like for the spring luncheon. Everybody would come in and we'd all count money after the luncheon, and Marty would order his pizza and we'd be there till everything was counted so that Marty could have a ballpark of how much money we raised. And we would be doing that as a team, and I'll send you some photos because those were really fun memories as well. And yeah, I think that's it. I mean, well, there's so many memories, but that was back in the early days that that we had some of those. So yeah.
Yeah, those are wonderful. When you were there, what impact did you see Mary's Place having in the greater Seattle community?
I think that the biggest thing Mary's Place did was they broke down. I think folks were nervous about being around a person who was experiencing homelessness. And I think there was just this, misunderstanding, like people didn't understand that, they're lazy, or, try to identify why somebody would be experiencing homelessness. And I think what Mary's Place did was, these are human beings, right? And I think under Marty Hartman's leadership, I mean, I obviously can't say enough about her and her vision for everything, but it was breaking it down, and it was working with volunteers, and it was working with teams of people to show them the face that these are human beings that are in crisis. And we have the ability to help them in whichever way that possibly can be, whether it's sitting with them and listening to their story at lunch, or getting them clothes, or being able to talk to their children and really help the kids understand that their parents didn't do anything wrong. This is just a blip on the little radar. We're going to get them through this. They have love and support, and they're worthy. And I think that was the biggest thing that Mary's Place did, that I saw, was that it just brought that human side to the crisis that we were experiencing.
Throughout your years there, how did you see Mary's Place change and grow as an organization?
Well, I think that, the need obviously changed. So when I started, it was primarily single women, and then our first families arrived. And so then, now we're dealing with that. We can't let these families go out onto the streets because these are children as well. So we had to, shift gears a little bit and find more shelter in the evening. So then we looked for vacant buildings. We worked with landlords to find, hotels and churches, wherever we could possibly bring families inside. So kind of going from a day center, realizing that we can't just be a Monday to Friday, that the problem doesn't end at 3 p.m. on a Friday, and you hope, everybody's going to make it fine, and everybody's going to be good by 7 a.m. on Monday. The problem is bigger, right? And it's a 24/7 issue. So I saw Mary's Place, every step of the way, and so much, our community really came alongside of us. Our corporate partners, our churches, and our volunteers just really came alongside to be able to offer more services, so that we could transition from a day center to a 24/7 shelter, and we could bring families inside. So that was the biggest thing. And the corporate partners, obviously, looking now alongside, the Amazon shelter, it's just come so far, so much more than we ever envisioned it in the very beginning. But I feel like that's obviously been the biggest piece that that happened during my time there. And that was exciting to see, was that we were able to get all that support, and to be able to offer programs. And then when the housing and diversion team started, so that we could actually even divert people that didn't even have to go into, families didn't have to go into shelter. They could go straight into housing. And those partners, the landlords, H&N, I mean, just coming alongside of us and really making apartments available so that we could bring families inside. That was critical. It's just, and having our own kitchen, and having a chef that knew how to, to properly prepare food and have food and bunch, that we didn't have to look at just a pantry to get through the day. It's just, there was those 10 years, I'll never I can never take those back, right? I was ready. I was ready to move on and do something a little different. But those 10 years were just incredible growth, incredible experiences, and an incredible awareness for human beings on both sides. The volunteers that came and gave their services and their money and helped us solve some problems, and then also the families that I met and the single women that I met. I'll always treasure those memories.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You spoke a little about this just now, but was there one event or perhaps a few events or time period that you think are particularly important to the history of the organization?
I think definitely the turning point was when the housing and diversion teams, when we were able to fund those teams and be boots on the ground and actually go in and look for families that needed shelter. That was a huge turning point, but also just the relationship with corporations. And I feel like when you particularly look, of course, Amazon, but you have so many other corporations that came alongside of us to with the facilities and helping us figure out, like, how do we go in and remodel this building so that we can create safe shelter. And we had so many teams of people with experience that just came alongside us to help us actually be able to create safe shelter. And I think that we could never have done any of what we did in those 10 years that I was there without the community alongside of us. Mm-hmm. And whatever capacity that looked like, providing buildings, providing facility support, providing food service expertise, giving us a kitchen, it was just amazing. So I feel like building those relationships was critical to Mary's Place going from that $480,000 budget when I started to 20 million when I left. We couldn't have done that without our community and without that support. So I'm not sure that answered your question, but
no, it did. Yeah, that was a great answer. Yeah. Well, finally today, this is just sort of an open-ended question, but if you have any other memories or insights or experiences that you want to share to be a part of this project, I invite you to share them with me now.
No, I think that, I think one of my funniest memories was when Marty, it was about 7 o'clock at night, and it wasn't really funny at the time, but a pipe had burst in one of our hotels downtown and water was just going everywhere. And it was a really hot night and there was no air conditioner at the shelter. And Marty came in and it was kind of a Lucy and Ethel moment where she looked at me. I was the only one left in the building. And she's like, "We've got to go support this staff. They're so burnt out. The water just keeps coming into the lower level." And she goes, "I found some boots that might fit you." And I looked over and I'm like, oh, sure, let's go, Marty. And so we went into donations and layered ourselves with all kinds of clothes. And she drove me over there and we, let the staff go get away from the building for a bit and be able to go eat. And Marty and we just kept looking at each other because it was really just the two of us. It was back in the day when we really didn't have a budget to have a plumbing service come in. So we're like, we've got to do this because this is after hours, so it's going to be way too expensive. Mm-hmm. So we've got to get this water under control. And we just looked at each other. I mean, we couldn't stop laughing and the water just kept coming and we were just mopping it up as fast as we possibly could and dumping the water on the street. And I think that in that moment, in the floor staff or the program staff that was on site was so grateful that they got to get away from the problem for an hour and, be able to regroup themselves because it was so devastating that literally we had to move everybody upstairs. And then it was about 3 or 4 in the morning when Marty ended up driving me home. And those are the memories, when we always tried to make everything work on a small budget. And so it was, back in the day when we didn't have the plumbing, budget, but to see where it is now and just to feel so grateful that it's just a whole different organization and they're able to afford that plumber now. But yeah, that's just one memory that.
Yeah. Well.
Oh
yeah. No, you can go.
Oh no, I was just gonna let you know. There's so many; it's so hard to choose. But I remember that one just sticking out because it was fun and not so fun at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing those memories with me and sharing your experiences about Mary's Place. I really enjoyed getting to talk to you and getting to ask you these questions. So thank you so much for participating.